You are very welcome to Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I, Toby Hadoke, get a special guest to nominate a story for me and to choose their favourite things about it. I then have to guess what those favourite things are. Well, hello everybody. According to my schedule, I should be doing a different story right now, but I'm 47 years old and I can do what I blooming well want, and I quite fancied watching Inferno. I was in an Inferno mood, and the beauty of Doctor Who is there's a story to suit whatever mood you're in, and I'm in the mood for a bit of gritty season 7 lava fascist shenanigans. Now, I know that this story has been set for me by, I always say this is done by a friend of mine, but in this case it's someone I've never met. We have conversed over the internet, and he's been in Doctor Who. Now this thrills me because there's a part of me that the idea that anybody that's been in Doctor Who would even agree to smile at me, let alone partake in something I'm doing, to give me the credibility of being a fellow human being, still, even though I'm 47, absolutely thrills me. Now, he got in touch after he'd sent his thing saying, I'm not sure I've done it right, because some of the other ones have been different, which means he's a listener and a viewer. Hello. But of course, I told him the way that this is done is that the guest has to take ownership, and they must appreciate Doctor Who and express their appreciation for the story that they've chosen, however they choose. Even if you're not 47, you can still do what you blooming well like. So I don't know what to expect from my guest, and I'm sure his fears are unfounded. So let's see who he is and why he's chosen this particular story in general terms, and then we'll hear from him at the end of this particular instalment to find out his favourite thing about episode 1.
Hi, Toby. It's thanks for having me on. For the multitudes out there who don't know me, my name's Jeremy Radick, and I played Gareth in the Doctor Who TV movie. And for the past 25 years, I've been shamelessly exploiting that to get me into exciting predicaments like this. And now it's brought me here to my basement to talk to you about Inferno. So it's maybe the Jon Pertwee story I've seen the most. I first saw it a very long time ago when it came out on VHS, and actually probably around the time that I was filming the TV movie, so it's always held a special place in my heart alongside Frontier in Space, because that's what I was watching it around the time I was also making the movie. Oh, by the way, if you hear some odd noises in the background, I apologize. It's actually because there's like a team of scientists and they're doing some drilling in my backyard. I mean, I don't know what it's about. Apparently there's some sort of, I think there's some kind of pockets of gas back there, and they're, drilling in. They're about to pierce the Earth's crust or something. I don't know. I didn't really pay attention. Anyway, so Toby, while I pop out and see what they're getting up to, why don't we see if you can figure out what my favorite thing about episode 1 is? I'll be back in a tick.
I already love Jeremy. I already did. He's been in Doctor Who. And I hadn't realised he was a fan when he did the show. I suppose I must have realised that in my head because he's spoken at conventions and stuff. But I think I hadn't put that together when I was thinking about this. What, did I think he'd become a fan afterwards and done it? Well, maybe, why not? But I love that story then, that he was watching Inferno and then going off to be in Doctor Who. Isn't that wonderful? I mean, the fact that being in Doctor Who is a dream that can come true for people, and has for many, I think is a wonderful thing, and wonderful thing about so many, people who've grown up loving it, who've had various involvements with it. That's an added level of joy, aside from the fact that it's a TV show we can love and pore over the minutiae of. I love the fact that he's got a team of scientists in his backyard. And I also love the fact that he's broken it up with captions, so I know when one section has stopped, so I can press pause, because quite often when I do this, actually breaking up people's contributions, it involves a lot of editing. So Jeremy is already in my good books. Thanks, Jeremy. So that's an interesting introduction. So what that means is that we will hear from Jeremy at the end of the episode. But what we're going to do first is we're going to watch that episode. My partner made, of those watching on video, my partner made that fellow, and look, he's got a Doctor Who scarf on. I normally set this up. Regular viewers and listeners will know that myself and remote controls do not have the best relationship. I'd got this all set up. I'm a blooming professional, and the remote control had done its best to bore like a mole down the back of the sofa. But I have it now. So if, like me, I'm watching the DVD of this, and the menu is not a series of tantalising clips. It's just a sort of bit from episode 7 that actually almost cuts out halfway through a sentence that I've had on a loop for a bit while I set this up. So it's a good job I'm not watching episode 7 for a bit. Now then, everybody, shall we watch Inferno? I'm going to, and I'm going to press play all. So I'm going to press enter in 3, 2, 1. And here we go. Now, I first encountered Inferno. I used to get bootleg VHSs from a shop in Wolverhampton. I think I've said this before. You took 2 tapes in, you got 1 back with episodes on it of varying quality. And after a while, because you got 7 episodes, but you got about another 13 minutes after 7 episodes, I asked Colin, the guy who did it, to stick something on the end. Anything to fill out, the remaining 13 minutes. And so on the end of something, I forget what now. It's interesting that I forget what. I would have known this information back in the day. I got the first 10, 12 minutes of Inferno. Colin was very keen for me to have the 7 episoders. He kept telling me how brilliant Doctor Who and the Silurians was, and it was his favourite story, because I realised, and I realised much later that that's because I used to go and request the orphaned episodes, or mix and match, a 4-parter and the first 3 parts of a 6-parter, then the back 6 parts and another 4-parter, which would involve lots of chopping and changing of tapes for him, whereas just sticking a 7-parter on was much. So I think this was part of his campaign to get me to choose 7-parters. But even that 13 minutes, it showed me that it was, it was a sort of cut above. It's got it's slightly disjointed because it starts with film, and it wasn't great quality because Inferno was for a while in black and white, or existed in and it still exists in slightly, the colour is recovered from, it's converted from NSTC, isn't it? Or it's not, it doesn't look as it would have done when broadcast. And obviously the bootleg version had even more problems than this. I mean, this cleaned up version, it doesn't have problems as such, but it doesn't look, you can tell that the picture quality is not as it should be, and I think that does affect our appreciation of it. In fact, with Inferno, I think it slightly counts in its favour because it does make it look slightly more sort of filmic and unusual. I think if this was as crisp as studio stuff is, I don't know, we might receive it slightly differently, as crisp as studio stuff that we have from later stories, or maybe not, who knows. But I certainly experience Inferno, I think, in a slightly different way, a slightly removed way. It's perhaps more movie-like because of this slight sheen it has from not being studio work that looks like it's come from an English print, as it were. The Doctor was singing La Donna Mobile, which is also sung by Private Tito, I think, in The 10th Planet. It's from Rigoletto. Christopher Benjamin as Sir Keith Gold, I think, is 4 years old here. I keep saying it's an interesting casting because I would have thought you would go older, but it works because what they've done is they've cast to character, which is this very gentle, benign, polite thing that Christopher Benjamin has, and he does have a certain civil servant air about him, and so it's a good piece of casting. But I think a slightly unusual one. Olaf Pooley, I think, is magnificent as Professor Stahlman. Doctor Who has its fair share of sort of mad scientists, but I find him extremely believable, and I think this all comes from Douglas Camfield, who is the director of this, who gives everything a realism and intensity. I love the fact that when Slocum, Walter Randall here, touches the green stuff, a little bit of smoke shoots out. That, to me, is a sort of Camfield touch. To go, it's not just enough to touch the green stuff. We have to have a little sizzle and a shoot, just a little bit of attention to detail. And we get these sort of we get this noise constantly in the background, and I think that sort of that Krakatoa howling, as it were. There's no incidental music in this. Well, there are just sort of stock or sounds, which is very interesting. And is it the last story without a musical score as such? I think it is. Yeah, it is. So that's a curious sort of throwback to the 60s, where often stories had just library tracks, or in some cases no incidental music at all. Walter Randall, he goes up and down with Doctor Who, really. He was a mate of John Pertwee. He was a mate of Douglas Camfield. I mean, he's in a lot of Camfield stuff. So he's Ella Keir, great baddie in The Crusade, and he's one of the Egyptians in the Dalek Master Plan, and then he's a guard in episode 1 of The Invasion, and then doesn't have an awful lot to do here, but it's a key role, I mean, Camfield did use people over and over again, and was interesting because the acting is always good in Camfield stuff, but he didn't necessarily go for drama school types. He would quite often promote an extra. I think, was Randall a dancer? I don't know, but he was South African, wasn't he? Walter Randall. I think he was a dancer at one point. I love the noise that the roar is given, and also the cut from thwacking somebody on the head with a wrench to a nail being hit into a wall. That is a very nice Camfield touch. I always feel John Levine always gives a better performance in a Douglas Camfield story. I know that Camfield helped John Levine to overcome his uncertainty. I think John would say himself he was sometimes quite intimidated by the experience of the thespians around him, and I think Camfield made him feel at ease, and does, I think, bring out the best of him. So there's some great stuff in Zygons as well. I mean, I always love Sergeant Benton, but I do think John's performance does vary sometimes, and I think he's I don't know, I get the impression he's much more relaxed when doing this stuff, and he flourishes as a result. He gets some nice comedy stuff. I really like the dynamic. Camfield, you didn't like the unit costumes either, so I'm guessing that's why Levine is in sort of proper military stuff rather than this stuff that they phase out in favour of proper military stuff, because unit had special costumes designed, and then I think Barry Letts asked the military, didn't he, and said what would they actually wear, and the military said, well, they'd just wear normal military stuff, to be honest. I like the idea of the wrench being red hot, because it's quite a slight story if you think about it. And I'm sure the legend was back in the day it had been a 4-parter extended to a 7-parter, and so the alternative world stuff had been added like that, but it wasn't quite like that. It was commissioned as a 7-parter, and the alternative world stuff was there, but it was introduced to make the story have a bit more to it, as indeed were the monsters. I shouldn't think this would be even though the monsters are questionable. I don't think this would be as well remembered if it was just about, a tense drilling operation. So that's producer Barry Letts and script editor Terence Dix knowing what ingredients you needed to throw in to a storyline that they nonetheless liked. Here's Derek Newark, last appeared in the very first Doctor Who story as the caveman Zar. And this is his final appearance in Doctor Who. He had a fantastic career. He became a leading player at the National Theatre, part of Bill Bryden's company of what Kevin McNally describes as broad-bottomed actors. But unfortunately that came with it a propensity for hard and heavy drinking. And that brought out some of Derek Newark's demons. I've done a biography of him in one of my other podcasts, in the podcast called Too Much Information for the Forest of Fear, and the story of the rise of Derek Newark, which then led to a plateau and sadly a fall. He got fantastic obituary in The Guardian that celebrated his talents, and Harold Pinter even augmented that with his own positivity. Pinter was a great fan of the work of Derek Newark, but I think Derek was could be hard work, and alcohol didn't bring out the best in him. So, he did have a good career, but dead at 65, having not been employed for the last 5 years of his life either much. At what expense a good career as a character actor, and of course different times where you could sink a load of drinks during a performance and not be fired, but that would not be the case now. And of course, at this time at the BBC, there was a BBC bar. People went to drink at lunchtime, didn't they? It's a totally different times. Some would say, "Oh yeah, but you produced the best work." In fact, I spoke to an actor at a do, quite a well-known TV face who'd been away from what he'd been doing and had come back to do a bit, and I said, "Oh, how are you finding coming back?" And he said, "Oh well, you used to be able to go to the bar and have a drink, but you're not allowed to anymore, and the work suffers." You go, "I'm not sure it does." And if your main feeling about coming back into a TV series is that you're now not allowed to have a drink at lunchtime, I think a bit of recalibration is probably needed. Yes, I always find this bit a little bit cringy, where Greg Sutton undermines Petra, and she has a go at him. But you're supposed to find it cringy. Greg is in many ways the hero of this, but he makes a Burke of himself, and that's actually quite nice for what happens later, and it's actually quite nice for Doctor Who, where women are often patronised and the show is not made to account for it. I think it very much is there, and I think Sheila Dunn does her cool riposte to Greg's casual sexism rather well. So I like all of these characters. I think all of these characters are nicely done, and I'm utterly convinced by Stallman's testy, patronising attitude to Sir Keith, and he's not a ranting madman. He's a testy prat. He's because of the way that Pooley plays it, you sort of sympathise with. You can see where he's coming from. He's not being an unreasonable. He's not been a Chief Robson from Fury from the Deep, who's going, "I just want to keep the thing switched on. Why? 'Cause I do." And it's all a bit one note. Even though I like Robson and I like Victor Madden, I find Stallman a cut above the usual Doctor Who mad scientist, and in the way that he's written and the way that he's played. And it's not a sort of predictable, he's going to start yelling by the end of episode 1 and he'll be yelling even louder by episode 7. It's more calculated than that, and it's more character-based than that. And Greg Sutton I love, because he's a hero. And there's a real likability, which makes the transformation of Derek Newark into, by all accounts, a bit of a loudmouth sometimes when he was drunk. Even sadder because he's very likeable on screen. Christopher Benjamin is likeable on screen and off. I can attest to that. He's a very affable fellow. And of course a Doctor Who legend, thanks to Henry Gordon Jago. Sir Keith Gold was, I think, originally called Sir Keith Mulvaney, and then Sir Keith Rose. I do like... Pertwee's brilliant, isn't he? I think season 7 Pertwee. And let's not forget, talking about... Who was I talking about being nervous in the studio? Oh, John Levine. John Pertwee had not done much drama in an electronic studio, if in fact any, prior to being Doctor Who. I know he'd done a couple of... I think he'd done a live Toad of Total or something, but that's not drama. And I know that Sue Upton, who was production assistant on Doctor Who The Silurians, said that he was very nervous during Silurians because he wasn't, because of course Spearhead from Space was all done on film, and Pertwee had done a lot of film, but doing drama on film is very different to doing it in an electronic studio where you've got a number of cameras at once to be to be conscious of, and various other things. David Simeon there as the friendly Private Latimer, who is introduced to be friendly for the sole purpose of when the Doctor comes back a bit later, and it's a parallel world, is unfriendly. That's all the character is, but that's fine. And what a lovely actor to get for it, David Simeon, who comes back for episode 1 of The Demons for one of the great one episode Doctor Who performances as Alistair Fergus. I have an interview that I've done with David actually kicking around that I've not found, that I've not used yet. So, I wonder if I should bring that out as a, because he's always interviewed about the Demons. I talked to him about Inferno as well, and he's a lovely chap. He was a great friend of Nigel Neal, who wrote the Quatermass serials, which of course heavily influence this season 7 of Doctor Who. In fact, Terence Dix, the script editor, always sort of said that season 7 of Doctor Who was not really Doctor Who, it was Quatermass, and I have some sympathy with that because it's a bit more hard-boiled and less fantastical. I love season 7 of Doctor Who. I do think it's my favourite Pertwee season, but maybe because it's an anomaly and I like things that are a break from the norm. But of course, to have something that is a break from the norm, you have to have the norm with which to contrast it. So I'm aware that my contrary brain maybe goes, well, I like that because it's different. Yeah, but if you didn't have a benchmark for the difference to be measured against, it wouldn't be so different. And would I like the Pertwee era if it was all like this? Or do I like season 7 because it's a glimpse of what could have been? But I think all the 7-parters sustain their length. I just like the whole setup. And I think Pertwee is, for somebody that hadn't done much drama in an electronic studio, and for somebody who was a comedian and a comic actor, I mean, that natural elegance that he has and that natural authority that he has. And Pertwee's often sort of talked of as an establishment figure, but he ain't half a prick to the annoying ministerial types, and so there is a sort of anarchist streak in him, but he deploys it to undermine bullies rather than just be generally disruptive. He would still have dinner with the Queen, but if an equerry decided to push his weight about, that's when the Pertwee Doctor would jump into action. Which is fine. Ian Fairbairn here. Yes, Ian Fairbairn is somebody who he was interviewed so many times. He was another sort of Douglas Camfield favourite. And I actually had the chance to meet him. And you know what? I collect autographs, I collect interviews, and I chatted to him, but I wasn't sort of bowled over because he very gamely contributed to all of the DVDs and was interviewed quite a lot. So I was just like, oh, it's Ian Fairbairn, yeah. And I think because he'd already been sort of acquired, as it were, I was less excited. And then, of course, he died sometime later, and I thought, why was I less excited? He was actually really generous with his time, so I should have... I did. I mean, I had a lovely time. I chatted to him and thing it's fine. But I wasn't as excited as I'd been if, say, somebody who'd never given an interview was around that day. And that's almost like not rewarding Ian Fairbairn for being so kind and generous and being on all of the DVDs. But because of that, it was quite familiar to me. But now I look at that as a squandered opportunity. So don't underestimate people, I would say. I wasn't dismissive of him, but as I say, I just wasn't as as excited as I would have been by. But that is interesting, isn't it? About people keeping their powder dry or withholding themselves. I think we always think people who give fewer interviews are somehow, a cut above or a bit more mysterious, or they're by their nature harder to get hold of, which is why so I know some comedians who are very much in the public eye who very much limit the amount of themselves that they give, and actually I think it does lengthen their shelf life, which, judging by the amount of podcasts I've said yes to, I'm probably well out. I'm probably I'm festering in the vacuum pack as we speak. I'm well and truly out of date. This is effective stuff done on film with a bit of Miralon to have the Doctor. It's a nice seeding in, because obviously the parallel world doesn't kick in properly until episode 3. But and that's interesting, because when I first started watching Inferno, I assumed episodes 1 and 2 would just be sort of there to be got out of the way before the real sort of meat. And episodes 1 and 2 are, I think, the only 2 studios that Douglas Camfield, the director, was properly in control of, because he fell ill during the production, during the second studio block. I think it was that early. So what we see in the studio for the first 2 episodes is him. And I know that he was slightly disappointed by Barry Letts's work on the later episodes, even though Letts, I know, followed his camera scripts. And I think you can still get Camfield, who is credited throughout, partially because he directed all of the film stuff, of course. But for a long time, it was, how much better would Inferno have been if Camfield had stayed for the whole thing? Well, it may have been slightly darker lit, but which probably would have helped. But I don't think the lack of Camfield is as much of a disaster as perhaps I was led to believe when I first read about it. The sound is excellent, isn't it? There's the alarms, there's the background noise. And it's a great character dynamic here. And these first 2 episodes are actually terribly, terribly exciting. And the move to the parallel world just ups the ante a bit and gives the story a different texture. But I think the first 2 episodes of this are terrific. I'm really enjoying this, and I love this developing story between Greg and Petra. It's in a world where everything goes horrible, and in fact literally turns horrible in episodes 3 to 6. The spark of something between them shines like a beacon of hope. I love Greg and Petra, and I hope they lived happily ever. Well, obviously in the parallel world, they don't get to live for very long. But it's not your liver, it's your general disposition. He's great, Pertwee, and I really like Olaf Pool's sort of just finds the Doctor to be really irritating, but you can sort of see it from Stallman's point of view, again without him appearing too irrational. And the smoke is great here, the lighting is nice, as I said, and Kate O'Mara, the Rani, was supposed to play. I know I've only was supposed to say Dr. Williams, or had been intended to play Dr. Williams. Now, something I noticed last time I watched this technician extra is black, and there's a female black technician extra, and I don't think they're in the parallel world as extras. The extras are different in the parallel world, and I wonder if that's a very subtle and clever piece of background actor casting. So that's the end of episode 1, which in my bootleg version was from Australia, and so at this point you had an Australian continuity announcer going, Doctor will be back tomorrow night with the Green Man, and there's a Doctor Who exhibition in wherever, Adelaide, featuring lots of props from the series, but I don't know if you'll see a Green Man. And I like the Green Man. Probably I'll do a podcast one day where I do a biography of the Australian continuity announcer who did the Green Man, who said all about the Green Man. It's terrific opening installment. It's already got a lovely atmosphere. I love all of the atmospherics of the whole of season 7, and I think Inferno is the acme of that. What do I choose as my favourite thing? I think I'm going to have to say Douglas Camfield. Just because I think as a director, he really announces himself. Well, no, he doesn't announce himself because that sounds like it's too much of a flourish. I just think you immediately establish that you're in safe hands, because more than safe hands, you're in the hands of a connoisseur. No, a connoisseur is the wrong word. You're in the hands of somebody who's more than capable, somebody who is always going to make every single moment that could be hokey, the bit where the guy touches the slime, the bit where the extra gets killed, and all those sorts of bits. He makes them count. But it's not just about the way that he shoots it, because he pays attention to the actors as well, and the little things like John Levine being relaxed enough to be able to cut to do his little bits of playful stuff, and the dynamics between the characters. We often talk about Camfield as an action director, but no, he's a detailed, meticulous director that just gets the best out of every moment. And as he won't be with us fully after episode 2, although his presence is felt for the whole story. And also because I suspect Douglas will be mentioned by Jeremy at some point. Now, if Jeremy chooses something in episode 2, I can't then choose that in episodes 3, 4, 5, and 6, 7. Whereas if I choose something now and Jeremy chooses it later, that counts in my favour. Them's the rules. Let's see what Jeremy liked about episode 1 of Inferno.
Wow. That was exciting, huh? So what's my favorite thing about episode 1? I wish I could say something sophisticated, like how well the script establishes the premise and all of the characters. You get to know who each of them are and their relationships to each other, and we see their radically different positions on the central premise, and they're all really interesting, and they're very round, and they're vibrant, and they're kind of brilliantly differentiated from each other with their own points of view. But frankly, I just love the title cards. Lava. I mean, who doesn't love some lava? It kind of gives it a special feeling, to have its own title cards. I loved it when they did it in the 60s. I'm really sad that they kind of don't do it really after this. And it's just great. It gives it this immediate apocalyptic feel. I mean, who doesn't love lava? It's pretty awesome. So that's my favorite thing. So while you crack on to episode 2, I'm just going to head back outside to my backyard again, because the scientists, they're saying that now that they've pierced the crust, there's like a slime or like an ooze coming out of the pit. So I'm going to take a look at that. But after episode 2, we'll come back and we'll see what my favorite thing is at that point. See if you can guess it. All right.
Oh, he's great, isn't he? Oh, the title cards. I meant to talk about the title cards, and I got distracted talking about bootleg videos. Oh, if only one could script these things. I will talk about the title cards at some point, so I won't waste time now, because I've got 7 episodes to wax lyrical throughout. But that is a good choice. The title cards are a good choice. I wonder if I would have chosen them at any point down the line, because of course I have to choose a bonus thing at the end, so I've got to come up with 8 things in all. But I can't choose the title cards now. Jeremy can still choose Douglas Camfield, but if he does, I've already chosen that, so I get a point for that. But for now, it's 1-0 to Jeremy, who is going to join me for all 7 episodes of Inferno, and I hope that you will too. and that I can manage to keep you interested throughout 7 episodes, and that I don't become too much of a bore. Oh. See you next time. Thank you so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which was presented by me, Toby Hadoke, and featured by special guest Jeremy Radick, who can be found on Twitter at Jeremy Radick. These podcasts would not be possible without the generosity of patrons, who include Sydney Wilson, John Williams, Rich Wiggins, Kevin West, Peter Ware, Gavin Ware, Alistair Wallace, Gary Wales, John Turner, Sidney Trote, Paul Taylor-Greaves, Adam Stone, Dave Stevens, David Spofford, David Spencer, Richard Smith, Paul Shields, Tom Solinsky, Gavin Rymil, Darren Rule, Alex Rowan, Paula Reynolds, Peter Reed, Quarridors, Liam Price, John Pettigrew, Thomas Payne, Ken Patterson, Richard Patey, Phil Pascoe, Russell Parker, and Mark Trevor Owen. The music for this podcast is by Dave Gates, and the podcast artwork by Dylan Patterson. Well, if you become a patron at patreon.com/Toby Hadoke, you don't just get the satisfaction of supporting a starving artist, you also get these releases several months ahead, and you get bonus and exclusive material. Tiers start at £3 a month, although you even get a 10% discount on that if you pay for a whole year in advance. There's also the Ko-fi option if you just want to make the odd donation rather than signing up for a regular thing. That's ko-fi.com/Toby Hadoke. Any financial support is, of course, hugely appreciated and flattering and flabbergasting, but I also understand that not everybody has the means to do so, and I'm just grateful to you for listening. However, do you know what costs nothing? Going to your podcast outlet and giving me 5 stars, yes please, and perhaps a couple of positive lines if you enjoy what this is doing, because that makes my algorithms seem more attractive to passers-by, and I want to flash on my algorithms and lure them into my abode. So if you could do that, I would be extremely grateful. But, mostly, thanks for listening. Outside of the world of Doctor Who, I'm a stand-up comic, and I do a regular comedy show in Manchester, England at Excess Malarkey Comedy Club every Tuesday from 8 p.m, and that club was online for the whole of lockdown, so we're going to still do that, but that's going to be on the first Sunday of every month from August 2021 on twitch.tv/Excess Malarkey. That's an X and an S and then the word Malarkey. Excess Malarkey is on Twitter at Excess Malarkey, as am I, at Toby Hadoke, as are these podcasts, at Hadoke Podcasts. That's 3 Twitter handles in one sentence. Makes you seem like a rather needy podcaster. Well, yeah, guilty as charged.